John, in our business that I run, we've created what I call a real culture of care.
Yes.
But accompanying the culture of care, that we also have values.
Yes.
I want you to elaborate on the culture versus values. Can one be without the other, or do they intermingle? How do you assess culture and values?
Well, that's a very relevant question currently, because in the debates about sexual identity and multiculturalism and multi-faith and all of those things, this has become an absolute hot potato, because the assumption of even some of my quite committed religious friends is that if Jesus teaches us to care and love one another, then we must at all points avoid conflict. And we must accept that you have your truth and I have my truth. Now, of course, the weird thing about this is it doesn't work in business and it doesn't work in science. I mean, you can think what you like about anything, but it doesn't change the reality. I mean, my grandfather, as I understand it, one day put some eye drops in Grandma's eye, and he thought they were eye drops. He'd taken them out of a little medicine cabinet, and he'd accidentally picked up a little bottle of creosote. I don't know what they used creosote for in Granddad's day, but of course it's absolutely deadly to eye tissue. And he dropped this in her eye and she screamed, and he realised he'd done the wrong thing. And fortunately, he washed her eyes out immediately and saved her. But he dropped those eye drops in her eyes with all sincerity. But if he hadn't acted quickly, contrary to what he'd done, he would have blinded her in what he thought was a loving act. Now, if one of my children is going to run out in front of a truck, I don't say, well, that's all right, darling, you do what you want to do, you know. I'm going to say stop, and I might even physically grab the kid and pull that child from the oncoming vehicle. In everything in life, apart from religious thought and values, there are truths and untruths. I mean, oxygen is oxygen. And if somebody puts a mask on me and feeds me from a tube something else, which has happened in hospitals in my lifetime, and there have been court cases about people who have been given the wrong gas, you know, when they've been in the operating theatre. I mean, all the goodwill in the world doesn't change that reality. But somehow, in this day and age, we think when it comes to values that they are just something that we all have personal autonomy over, and we can believe whatever we want to believe. Now, when I look at what's happening to our society now, and I see the serious breakdown, when I see a generation with more education, more entertainment, more time to spend in amusement because of our financial prosperity in Western countries, more medical provisions, more of everything we said would bring us happiness, more freedom to believe whatever you want to believe, to act almost any way you want to, as long as you don't deliberately hurt somebody else. And I look and I see the greatest percentage of the youngest generations of young people in almost a plague proportion of the development of clinical depression. Now, I haven't got time to go into it in a short thing like this, but if you look up the great modern psychologist or psychiatrist, Martin Seligman, who was head of the American Psychological Association for many years, Seligman and some of his mates worked on a way to define different sorts of depression. And they found that people that were in Amish communities or in tribal communities, once he defined clinical depression, he found they had virtually no clinical depression and no suicide. And here in our Western country, with our values all over the place, we find the disease of despair and of depression just sweeping across our land to younger and younger people. Now, according to Seligman, if he's right, the reason is that if you get a society that sees that values are about togetherness, that we have to share values and we have to live them together in community, those communities don't seem to suffer from clinical depression. Because he says clinical depression, unlike bipolar condition, where they found these groups had the same percentage of bipolar people, but not clinical depression, he said in those societies, the messages people get from their culture shape the issues that either guard you against or plunge you into depression, even despair and suicide. And I believe that if we were being intelligent about it, we have enough clinical signs in our Western culture to show that individualism, materialism, self-interest, all of those things have actually stripped us of the essential spiritual and social values that make for a healthy community. And that, of course, means healthy individuals in connection in that community. So I really believe that we need shared values, not just a hodgepodge of individual values all over the place. I mean, you've said you do it in business, mate. You know that you can't run a business with everybody making up decisions for themselves.